Hey everyone, it's Tom here, and joining me today is John.
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Yeah, pretty good, because I've got Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition in my hands, on Switch obviously. This is a year after the Fire Emblem Warriors, which came out from the same studio, I believe.
Okay, yeah, so Fire Emblem Warriors actually came out later in the year. I looked at it last E3, and then the final version came out and was drastically improved. We didn't actually do final coverage of the game, but I can say that it had a low-res 720p 60 frames per second mode and a 1080p 30 mode. And it did a reasonable job of hitting 60, but it wasn't consistent. So with Hyrule Warriors then being a port from the Wii U, I'm kind of hoping that we might actually get to a proper 60 frames per second here.
So on the outset, I was hoping the exact same, being a Switch version of the Wii U. You get the promise of all the DLC added from the Wii U and 3DS versions of the game. So that's all the maps, characters, and a few minor tweaks and changes to gameplay. So going in with that, you kind of think it could very well be just a 1080p up-res of the Wii U game, which ran at 720p. And to cut to the chase, it is kind of that. It runs at 1920 by 1080, which isn't a bad shout for the Switch.
Really though, I mean, the Wii U version doesn't look bad, honestly. It has some problems, and I kind of experienced that again, having played it recently. Well, to cut a long story short, it doesn't run very well. The game is capped at 30 frames per second, but it has a lot of frame pacing errors and constant slowdown. It just feels bad. I'm not gonna mince words here. It doesn't feel good to play. And that was always kind of a disappointment for me. And I think Fire Emblem Warriors was a huge upgrade in that regard. First impressions on Hyrule Warriors for Switch though, you kind of mentioned that it's a little bit shaky at times.
It's more than a little bit shaky, yeah. So the goals have changed, the goalposts have moved, if you like, because obviously on the Wii U version, 30 FPS was the target there, and it didn't really hit that. It was kind of 25 to 30 most of the way, and even worse again on 3DS. So,
well, porting a Wii U game to the 3DS, that was already a tall order, and yeah, it kind of turned out as you'd expect, which is to say, not amazing. It doesn't look great, it doesn't run great, but, it was a portable system, it's the 3DS, so it didn't feel like, a huge downgrade in the sense that the hardware was much weaker. Whereas with Switch, I was kind of expecting a huge upgrade, or at least a reasonable size one.
Yeah, so it kind of bears mention because Switch has that portable element to it, and so 3DS is a natural comparison point, as well as the Wii U, because it kind of does both things. It's the home console experience as well.
It only does everything.
Yeah.
Apparently.
But unfortunately, looking at the frame rate side of things, well, it kind of doesn't, because, 60 FPS is the new target here. But really, it's going between 40 to 60, and sometimes below 40, so I've scanned in a whole bunch of clips from kind of that opening mission around Hyrule Castle, taking down a few bosses. From the off, it's just plummeting down to the 40s and up to 60. In fact, I rarely see it hit 60. So yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, if it's got this sort of overhead and it can't hit 60, why not use a frame rate cap?
Yeah, exactly. Is that an option?
It's not, no.
That's a weird thing then, because like I said before, Fire Emblem Warriors has what Koei likes to call their cinematic mode and their, I don't even remember, action mode, I think. It was in Neo and it was in Fire Emblem Warriors, and it's basically a selector between higher frame rate or better image quality. And yeah, by targeting 720p in that game, the Switch did actually get reasonably close to hitting 60 frames per second most of the time, except for in, larger combat where you're dropping into the 50s, but it was pretty good actually.
There's no functionality like Warriors, you just have what they give you from when you boot it up, and that is 1080p in docked mode with a 40 to 60 FPS range. And bear in mind, I've only seen the first two levels, the Hyrule Castle and a later sort of fiery lava area as well.
And they sort of ramp up too, so
Yeah, so that doesn't bode well, does it?
The thing to keep in mind here, though, is that, I mean, we're coming from a very unstable 30 frames per second to a very unstable 60, and while I don't like unstable frame rates in that way, it's hard to argue that the other versions are superior. I mean, clearly, the Switch version does offer a better gameplay experience. The frame rate is higher, image quality is better. It's the best version of Hyrule Warriors, but it still doesn't seem to be quite as good as it should be.
But, you know, if we switch to the portable mode, which is how I played it, you know, the first time I picked it up, yeah, I can see exactly where people are coming from in terms of the complaints, because right away you're looking at even worse frame rate. I haven't got the exact measurements on this, but it is much lower than the docked version. It just feels like...
Is it sub 30?
I'd estimate it is around sub 30, but that's just purely going by eye. And we've spoken about this just before. Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, so it seems that they're actually downscaling from 1080p instead of just running at the native 720p of the panel.
Yeah, you noticed this in a few screenshots before even kind of playing the game.
Yeah, there was some screenshots posted around on various forums, and I was like, oh, you know, that looks really good, like image quality wise. And then hearing all the complaints about performance, it's like, oh yeah. And then, you know, you confirmed it today. It's like, yeah, it is actually downsampled. So it seems like effectively the portable mode runs with the same visual detail as the docked mode. So on one hand, it's unfortunate for the gameplay experience, but on the other hand, it's kind of a weird little peek at what would happen if you ran a Switch game at the same settings in both modes. Like, what kind of impact does running a portable mode have on a game like this with these specific bottlenecks?
It does remind me a little bit of another game we covered, Payday 2. Not necessarily the best showcase technically for Switch, but it had this glitch where if you switched over mid-game between portable and docked, it would stay at the resolution of docked. So to kind of avoid that this time and see if it was a glitch or not, I just completely rebooted the game, and sure enough, 1080p downscaled to 720p on that screen.
It's weird in portable mode, doesn't run great in any mode at 1080p, but did you notice anything else? I mean, did they upgrade any textures? Or the texture filtering, is that pushed out at all? Or is this pretty much exactly the same game?
It is the exact same game. From what I can see, textures, model quality, there's no anti-aliasing, just like the previous versions of Hyrule Warriors. Texture filtering looks just as muddy and soup-like from a distance. With that being said, I did notice one thing in alpha transparency quality on Switch. If you look at this boss here, you can see the flames in the background are actually higher res on Switch. So there is a plus there at least over Wii U, but for the rest, it is pretty much the same deal. You also get that strange sort of shadow pop in from a distance. Just sort of, there's no real proper fade to it. It's just like, now there's a shadow, and then there isn't, depending on your range. There's a chance that the enemy count has been boosted. I've noted in one shot that there's actually a higher kind of NPC count in the distance. No, but that is just looking at it from a distance. There's just no way to properly put a number on that.
So yeah, for me, I mean, I'm looking at all of the recent, like, Musō games, as they're known. All of these games that Koei is putting out there. It's really disappointing in general, because I feel like they're just falling so far from what the series was originally designed to be. I mean, when this series launched on PlayStation 2, it was a 60 frames per second game. And like every game on that system was 60 frames per second. Sometimes a little slowdown, but you know, it was pretty smooth. And then you get to the PS3 generation, there was stuff like Gundam Warriors, or whatever they called it. The Gundam games, those were 60. But then you actually got to the real Dynasty Warriors and they started doing 30, and then they're doing all these spin-offs and they're always 30. And then we just had Dynasty Warriors 9, I guess, and it was just atrocious performance-wise with their new engine. Now this port of Hyrule Warriors, it's just wildly unstable. I feel like they're missing something here. Like, they've made so many of these games, but they seem to have such a hard time as of late in nailing down performance, which I feel is one of those things that needs to get fixed.
What we really need is that 720p 60 mode here, I think. There's no way around it.
That would help a lot. That would help a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, right now, Fire Emblem Warriors does provide a better experience for that reason. I mean, it's jaggier, but it plays a lot better.
Overall, though, I just say it is a decent port of the experience. It could just do with a patch, one way or another, 1080p 30 with a cap, or the 720p 60. I think that would just solve it for everyone. You know, yeah. And the portable side of things, I think that is an oversight, to be honest. No one's really appreciating super sampling on that tiny screen.
I agree.
So, you know, it's a wasted resource.
I'd say lock it to either 720p at 30 or see what it can do at 720p or lower with an uncapped frame rate. I'm not sure, but downsampling, not the right choice here.
Right, so I think that about covers all the bases there. So thanks for joining me, John.
Sure thing, Tom.
If you did enjoy this analysis, give us a like or subscribe, and also you can set up notifications to get our videos as soon as they land on the channel. So
yeah,